my fellow panelists.
I'm Narayani Gupta, a junior majoring in economics, possibly also minoring in Chinese.
I'm Lynn Hsu, I'm also a junior, and I majored in Chinese, but probably going to double major in chemistry.
Hi, my name is Alice. I'm a junior, and I'm an art history and history double major.
And then I'm Claire Tam. I'm also a junior, and I'm a political science major officially and thinking of adding a history minor.
I'm Wen-Yan Deng, is also on our panel. Unfortunately, she could not be with us today due to a medical emergency, but she's with us in spirit. So first I'll give a brief overview of what the program was all about, and then we'll each share individual reflections. Modeled after the Albright Institute, this partnership program is part of a new initiative called Women.World.Partners. And the theme of this summer's program was empowering women for leadership, challenges of an urban future. So 20 women from Wellesley and 20 women from Peking University, which from now on I'll refer to as PKU, gathered on the PKU campus in northern Beijing for 10 days at the beginning of this past June. Coming from China, US, India, as well as a few other countries, we lived together, learned together, and establish relationships that I hope will be long-lasting and meaningful. Many faculty members from both institutions also joined us, as well as consultants, many Wellesley alumni, and finally, for a culminating conference, there were around 300 women and a few men, where we talked about women's leadership. And during our busy 10 days, we also had some time to explore the city of Beijing and connect what we were learning in the classroom to one of the world's largest cities. So here we went to the National Museum, we went to the Beijing Planning Exhibition Hall, listened to an outdoor concert put on by Ling Ling and Tan Dun, and volunteered with children at a migrant school. And of course we went shopping because we were in Beijing. Although visiting the Great Wall and the Forbidden City are very typical tourist stops for anyone visiting Beijing, they are unforgettable and symbols of China's long history. For most of the time, though, we were in a classroom listening to faculty lectures about urbanization and beyond. At the same time, we were also broken down into small groups, in 6 small groups, where we did research on our own, extended our research to reach out to faculty members and experts in our fields, applied what we were learning in faculty lectures to solving issues or looking for solutions to major issues of global urbanization, including public health, education, transportation, housing, cultural heritage, and sustainability. So at the end of the 10 days, each group presented their recommendations and innovative solutions to these pressing problems. The program culminated in an incredible all-day conference where leaders from all over the world convened to share their stories and their advice. We were fortunate to be sitting at small round tables with the speakers and keynote panelists. And we heard perspectives from all different types of women and all different types of careers on how to lead in the world as a woman. I'm very grateful and proud that I was one of the panelists, and we shared our experience in the program, very much like what we're doing at today's Tanner panel. So in my personal opinion, and I think many of the program participants can agree, as well as the leaders and organizers of this program can confirm, 40 women from all different backgrounds worked in a very empowering environment to become global leaders, gaining the knowledge, understanding, collaboration of 2 different cultures to really make a difference, hopefully, as leaders in this world. So we're very, very grateful to everyone that helped us plan this program, and of course, Val and Albright is a tremendous inspiration. Now going into sharing our personal experiences, we'd like to start off with a brief video that incorporates all of the program participants, including the PKU women's perspectives on why they joined the program.
My name is Kaylee Haskell and I'm a rising senior at Wellesley College. I study English and education.
Hi, my name is Cynthia. I'm a rising junior from Wellesley College with a double major in international relations and history.
I'm Isabella Doherty. I'm a rising junior at Wellesley. I'm an economics and Chinese double major. And so this program exactly matched my academic interests and I was just so excited when I first saw it.
I think initially when I applied for this program, it's partly driven by my personal interest in China, being of Chinese descent, but also I think a lot of the issues we're discussing doesn't only apply to China or America, but really applies around the world and to any country that's really developing and facing the challenges of urbanization.
I participate in this activity because I think it is a quite serious problem that sometimes in the world women's voice disappears in too many manpower.
I chose to participate in this program because I'm really interested in urbanization and plan to study urban planning.
I'm really interested in this program because I think a lot of the problems that the world faces are very multifaceted, and I really enjoyed the interdisciplinary approach that the Albright Institute takes towards solving these problems. I like the fact that we're kind of given together oriented lots of innovation. Yeah, thank you.
Why I'm here because I really want to make some friends and know more about American culture.
So I came here really wanting to understand environmental issues in developing nations, and since being here, I really love learning about the cultures from women my age.
For me, this program was just an incredible opportunity to fill in a gaping gap in my knowledge of the world, to learn more about China and to engage in some really incredible conversations with my peers. Also, as an American Studies major, I think I very often look at America through an American lens, and I think it's important to get international perspectives on that as well.
I chose to participate in this because I'm really interested in cross-cultural and interdisciplinary exchange to better understand world issues.
And also, since when Wu told me that Albright is going to be here, every girl studying international relations, and it's like, wow, okay, I'm
So, travel to another Asian country and see, compare the differences and similarities, and look at the effects of urbanization on public health, and also health education, because that's what I'm very passionate about. And why I'm interested in the program is because I want to know more about different understandings of Chinese culture, and I want to know more about my American peers and to be friends with them.
And having the opportunity to really work with the PKU students and to be able to live with them in the dorms has been an outstanding experience.
I'm really glad I took part in this program. I just want to thank the school for giving me the opportunity, and thank you guys for accepting us to be a part of this.
Alright, so I hope you all enjoyed hearing from the rest of the participants. And now we'll go and jump into our individual personal journeys, both with the program and then extending to Wellesley, where we are right now. Okay, so I'll start with my own experience. As a high school junior, I lived in Beijing for about 9 months with a Chinese host family, learning Chinese, traveling, volunteering, and getting to know Beijing. When I was applying to Wellesley, I was very excited about the possibility of participating in the Albright Institute winter sessions. But when this opportunity popped up to go to Beijing, I was very excited because I thought that this perfectly fulfilled the mission of the Albright Institute for Global Affairs. What better way to gain global understanding than to go to a foreign country and learn with my counterparts in that country. So this is a picture of my Chinese host family in 2008, and I lived with them again this summer and actually brought one of the Wellesley participants home with me to meet my host family. With my love of China, I was so happy to go back to Beijing again and participate in this new program. In many ways, I feel like Beijing is my second home, and I love being able to share this connection to a foreign city with my American counterparts, many of whom had never been to China before, and then also with my new PKU friends, many of whom lived in Beijing. When we had free time, outside of our rigorous academic and research schedule, I organized some events for all participants to explore the city. And it was in these times that I felt that true friendship between both cultures really took place and lasted. So I also used my language abilities to bridge sometimes very apparent language and cultural divides. For example, when working with my group members to brainstorm and research promoting public health for women, especially rural and minority women, a lot of the times the PKU members I felt weren't really speaking up. And I think this was because some of what we were saying in very rapid English was kind of going over their heads. Even though they're understanding, or they're nodding their head, yes, we understand, I understood where they're coming from because that happens to me a lot in Chinese. It's nominative language, and sometimes I nod my head, yeah, I know what's going on. But really, it's really hard to speak up and say, I have these questions, I have these ideas, and make myself very understood. So I worked in my group to help the Peking University students feel confident to really speak up and share their opinions or maybe translate a little bit. And then also encourage the Wellesley members to listen and be patient. I really enjoyed getting to know both my Wellesley and PKU peers, and I think these friendships are one of the most important decoys from this program. The conference that I spoke of earlier was an incredible opportunity that challenged me to be confident to speak in front of a room of 300 people. And it was also a day where I met many very interesting and valuable and meaningful connections with women that were not in the program. Most of them were Wellesley alumni that I actually saw throughout the rest of the summer in Beijing. So because I was in Beijing for the rest of the summer at an internship, which I'll talk about in a little bit, I kept in touch with many of these women and saw some of them again. I even saw one of the women I met who I was sitting next to at my table at the conference in New York City the other weekend, where she invited me to lunch with her entire family. I also made a point to go back to the PKU campus and see my PKU friends, which I thought was I felt very lucky to be able to see them again in person and follow up with them beyond just the 10 days of the program. So a couple of Wellesley alumni who were at the conference and also helped plan some of the excursions in Beijing held an ice cream social at the very end of the summer for all new, current, and former Wellesley women in Beijing. This really tied my network together from the beginning of the partnership program to the end of the summer with all these new friends that I had met and new contacts and skills that I had gained. And it really got me excited to come back to Wellesley after being away for an entire year abroad. So actually none of the women in this picture were participants in the program, but they attended the conference. And one of the women up here is Michelle. She owns 3 restaurants in China, one in Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Beijing. And she graciously invited Wellesley women to join one of her events at her restaurant and then treat us to dinner afterwards. I feel like this partnership program really set the stage for the rest of my summer, including an expanded network and the confidence to take on greater leadership roles. But also, I learned how to work very closely in a small group, to think critically about how to analyze problems, conduct in-depth research, and then synthesize information into tangible solutions and recommendations. My experience in the program tied in perfectly with my second internship at Albert Stone's group, which is a global strategy firm based in DC. I'm pictured here in their Beijing office, and I worked previously also in the Shanghai office. It was incredible to be back in Beijing this summer. First at Peking University, living with my Chinese host family, which we lived right north of the Olympic Park, and commuted almost an hour to work on the subway in the financial district to work all right Stone's group. Throughout this summer, I had really interesting new friends that I hope will be part of my personal and professional network for a long time to come, including
trip to a school for migrant children, some of the differences I observed between the education systems in India, the US, and China, the Wellesley network, and some of the friendships I forged. 2 years ago, when I started my journey at Wellesley, I decided to take Mandarin in addition to my coursework and economics. All the discussions about China as a rising economic superpower and the prospect of being able to communicate with over half of the world with Hindi, English, and Chinese motivated me to take up this challenge. After a semester of struggling to memorize characters and correctly say tones, I realized how much I really enjoyed learning the language. To improve my skills in Mandarin and understand Chinese culture better, I spent last summer in Beijing attending an immersion program and volunteering at an NGO to teach English to seniors. Last spring, when I heard of the Wellesley-Peking University partnership, it seemed like the perfect way to learn from a very strategic political and economic partner. The program, based on the methods of the Albright Institute, would allow me to work in a multidisciplinary setting with Wellesley students, as well as some of the brightest minds in China. The conference was a great start to the summer before my following internship in Shanghai. In addition to the lectures and our visits to cultural sites in Beijing, one of the most enriching parts of the program for me was the group work. My group consisted of five students with majors consisting of economics, environmental science, political science, and international relations. Wellesley encourages working in teams through group work in classes, but working in an interdisciplinary setting comes with its own advantages and challenges. Working closely with my Chinese peers, I realized how similar China and India were. China's education system closely resembles India's. There's a heavy focus on academics, whereas students' work is mostly determined by the grades they get. In order to secure admission into a top university, you have to do exceptionally well in your national level high school examinations, called the Gaokao in China, or the board examinations in India. We in Asia encourage our children to become successful engineers, doctors, lawyers, accountants, but not necessarily great thinkers, philosophers, writers, and even economists. During the program, many Wellesley students, as Josie-Dee has mentioned, noted that the PKU students seem to listen more than express their own opinions. Coming from India, this didn't strike me as much. Because of strong pressure to do well, many students tend to agree with whatever information is presented to them by their elders instead of questioning and expressing their own thoughts. They also tend to be more focused on getting the work done than engaging in discussion and looking at all perspectives. The PKU students, on the other hand, felt that the Wellesley students were confident, fierce, and even intense. They appreciated how willing we were to ask questions and ask for things we didn't know or understand. Over the course of the program, however, as Josie-Dee has just mentioned, the students felt more encouraged to ask questions and express themselves. They felt much more comfortable by the end of the program. I also noticed differences in how the Chinese students communicated with the faculty and the rest of the speakers. My roommate told me that it seemed as if the Wellesley students were friends with the faculty, while the relationship between the students and faculty at PKU was much more hierarchical. Many of these differences in the education system stem from differences in culture between the East and the West. In China, as well as in India, certain ideals like filial piety and obedience are held in high regard, even if that means suppressing one's own voice. In the US, creativity and independence are more highly valued. I noticed many similarities between the students as well. We all shared similar interests and aspirations. We all hoped to change the world and sought knowledge. The need for reform in the education system was again brought to my notice during our visit to a school for migrant children. I first learned about the ecosystems last summer in Beijing. In China, every family is attached to a district they're from and cannot access public services and other parts of the country. This system has been implemented to restrict internal migration. Without it, there would be an even higher population movement to the coast. The hukou especially affects children of migrant workers as they cannot attend regular school when their families move to bigger cities in hopes of a better future. During our trip, we had to do an activity with the children where they had to talk about their family background, interests, and future dreams. In the pictures, they had to draw trees explaining their backgrounds, interests, and dreams. So here are a few pictures from our activities. The answer for their dream professions ranged from teacher, lawyer, doctor, to astronaut. One girl even said she wanted to be China's first female president. It was heartwarming to see that these children wanted to be contributing citizens. But I started to wonder if their dreams would ever be fulfilled. We watched a video where children from rural China talked about what they wanted to be when they grow up. But all of them mentioned that their financial constraints would not allow them to pursue higher education. They too would have to start working in order to support their families to keep life going. Thinking about how these children may not be able to go to college brought tears to my eyes. I realized how fortunate I was to be at a place like Wellesley. Over the course of 2 years, Wellesley has surpassed my expectations in many respects. Needless to say, the academic program is excellent. In addition to my coursework and economics, I have been able to study Chinese and spend the last 2 summers in China. I've met many women from around the world who are driven to excel and help make the world a better place, and faculty who genuinely care about their students. My experiences at Wellesley have made me a better version of myself. I believe I've evolved into a much more confident and well-rounded human being, who, as of this summer, is also capable of managing her own life in a foreign country. There are, however, things I still learn about Wellesley as time goes on. Wellesley's alumni network is famous, but I hadn't experienced the strength of the sisterhood until this summer. I was supposed to be interning in Shanghai after the program at PKU ended. The day after I reached Beijing, my housing in Shanghai fell through. Knowing how difficult it was to find housing in the first place, I thought I would have to take my vegetarian self back home to India after reaching Shanghai. However, China was not ready to let go of me that quickly. The first woman to come to my rescue was Joanne Murray, director of the Albright Institute and herself a Wellesley alumna. She assured me that things would work out. Ms. Murray put me in touch with the alumni in Shanghai who came forward to help. At the concluding conference, I had the pleasure of meeting one of these alums. After reaching Shanghai, this woman took me to her house from a get-together at another Wellesley alumnus house. This is a picture of a Wellesley get-together we had the first week I was in Shanghai. It's at Ms. Shernian's house, and Sarah Coating is standing outside. She took me home, gave me all the pots and pans I needed to cook, and all other household things to get me started. She helped me only because she felt it was her duty to look after her Wellesley littles. Sarah Coating also connected me with an Indian alum who's also in the picture standing next to her, who then in turn connected me with 2 Indian college students. The bottom right picture is of me with my 2 Indian friends. These women became my closest friends in Shanghai. We met multiple times every week, and their families fed me a lot of good homemade Indian food. At the same Wellesley get-together, I met a recent graduate of class of 2011, Candace Snowden, who's in this picture at the top left. Candace was working in Shanghai at the time. Both of us became close friends, and we traveled to Nanjing and Hangzhou together. The middle picture is of me with my roommate from PKU, Tianqing, who's a master's student at Brown University. The top right picture is of me with Tianqing and 2 of our Wellesley fellows, Neha and Malika. And the bottom left picture is of us when we explored Beijing. While returning Sarah Coakling's stuff at the end of the summer, She said she didn't want anything in return for herself, but wanted me to help other students who would reach out to me in the future. That day, I fully understood the meaning of the Alumni Network. Over the summer, I learned about urban challenges, collaborated with Chinese students, climbed the Great Wall for the second time, improved my Chinese, traveled to 9 cities and towns, learned to live by myself in a big city, dealt with everything from cockroaches and blown electrical fuses to negotiating in Chinese with greedy real estate agents. I was basically perpetually out of my comfort zone. But most importantly, I learned how to build long-lasting relationships. Growing up, it always took me time to get used to a new school and people when we moved. But this summer, I learned how to build my own network in a new setting. My summer would not have been the same if it weren't for the people I met. And I have to thank Wellesley for providing me the opportunities to become the best person I can be. Good afternoon, everyone. So, once again, my name is Lynn Hsu, and I am a junior. And I'm here to speak a little bit about my motivations for signing up for this initiative. And I'm going to start off with speaking a little bit about my personal background, because I thought that really contributed to why I chose to take part in this program. So, I kind of divided my childhood into 2 cities. I was born in the Bay Area in California, right by San Francisco, on the left there. And I grew up there, but I'm the child of 2 Taiwanese immigrants. And so because of that, my parents often took me back to Taipei, which is their home, to go and visit family and to stay connected to my heritage. So I've always felt I sort of had one foot in each world. And I think in many ways my childhood was very archetypal in the sense that a lot of other Chinese Americans could probably relate to what I grew up with. But I'm ethnically Chinese and I haven't really been back to the mainland before, and I'm a Chinese major. So when they announced that this program is going to be held at Peking University, which is one of the top institutions in the world, I just thought that I had to be there, and it was just such an amazing opportunity. And then after this program, I came back, and as I've mentioned, I'm a Chinese major, and I'm also going to be declaring chemistry. And so, typically these sort of programs are aimed more towards, I would think, economic majors or international relations. So I got a lot of questions about what motivated me to sign up for this program when typically people in my position wouldn't. And I kind of did some thinking, and I've summed it up in this page. And so I'll start on the left-hand side. And as I mentioned, I wanted to learn about China and meet new people. I thought that the opportunity to go study with students from another institution in China was just one I couldn't resist. And then going counterclockwise, I also thought that this was sort of an encapsulation of the liberal arts experience, which we spend a lot of time talking about here at Wellesley. I'm a double major, and I'm a big fan of interdisciplinary education. And this is what the liberal arts experience is about. It's about taking what you learned in a classroom and applying it across all different fields and realizing education happens not necessarily when you're doing coursework or working on a piece set, but when you learn the practical meaning of what you're doing. So that was very clear to me because my research project with my group was on arranging land use for affordable housing in China. And out of the 6 members of my group, I was a chemistry major and Chinese major, and there were 3 or 4 economics majors. And we were reading a lot of economic papers in Chinese and English and interviewing these very high-level economists, and I knew nothing about this, so I was completely out of my depth. But I thought it was a really good experience because that's the point of education, is to try and challenge yourself. And then next, I also wanted to do this program because I thought it'd give me a better understanding of world issues. So a lot of the problems we were trying to answer during this program, they're not specific to China, even though we looked at China. These are problems that our generation is going to have to face all over the world. So my group was looking at affordable housing. Certainly that's applicable in the US and all over the world. Narayani talked about how we went to go learn more about universal education. We looked at preserving cultural heritage and lots of other sort of topics with these broad applications. And I feel that Wellesley can be slightly insular, which relates to the next point, escaping the Wellesley bubble. Wellesley can be very insular. When I'm at school, I'll admit, I don't always pay attention to the news. That's not a good thing. We should all be aware of what's happening around the world. These are problems that we're going to have have to face eventually. And this putting myself out of my comfort zone and taking myself around the world kind of showed me that I needed to be more aware of what was happening. And this also gave me really good sort of general education in how I could start approaching solving these problems. And that ties in with my next point, which was I thought this program really helped me develop a lot of practical skills. Two that come to mind particularly was this program was excellent at teaching me how to network. And networking is not something that comes naturally to me. And it's not really something you can teach in a classroom. But during this program, we got the opportunity to attend a business conference and meet lots of alumni and other very high-powered Chinese women. And so interacting with them and learning how you could go about making these positive relationships was useful for me. And I think that I'll be able to take that with me into whatever career field I eventually go into. And it also taught me about working across cultural barriers because we were working in these small groups, but we were working with students from a different institution, from a different, just a completely different background. And these cultural divides would show up and we'd have to learn how to work around them. And a really good example to me was, at the end, a lot of the Wellesley-Peking University students all noted that one of the great cultural barriers that came up was the work expectation. Peking University students mentioned that for them, the way that they approached group projects was they tended to divide up the workload and then each work individually, versus the Wellesley students were all very used to meeting up constantly and discussing the program between them. So at the very beginning when we were developing our research projects, that was a very big issue because the Peking University students didn't understand why we were always meeting. And the Wellesley students didn't understand why they never wanted to meet. And then this program also gave me a lot of opportunity to learn more about how to research. And so researching is something I do in all of my classes. But this was a different type of research. I mentioned we were doing a lot of economic research and urban planning. And so this required me to learn how to use new databases. And then we were also had to get into the habit of contacting new people. So we would cold call professors to learn more about our project. And that's not something that I'm very comfortable with, but I had to become comfortable. And then in addition to the research opportunity, we were also at the very end required to give a 15-minute presentation and present ourselves as experts on our topic. So the public speaking aspect was very useful for me as well. And then finally, or in addition to that, I thought that it was also really sort of a fun way of making me apply my Wellesley education in creative ways and teach me new ways of thinking. Because it was sort of fascinating to me. I've taken all these coursework in chemistry and Chinese, and I found that some of the lessons I picked up from what I've learned here, I could still apply to this new topic, urban planning, in ways I never even considered. So, and that was very clear when we had some Bain consultants come in and give us personal advice on how to develop our research projects. So they were telling us like how we could go about solving these large, very broad world issues, but by breaking it down into smaller chunks and then addressing each of these issues. And then finally, Josie-Dee has mentioned the business conference, and Narayani has mentioned the Wellesley Alum Network, and I think that's all very indicative of how this program really helps develop a sense of women's leadership. So the title of the program was Women.World.Partners, but I don't think it really sinks into you until you kind of are faced with how powerful women can be in these situations. For me, the most empowering part of the program was getting the opportunity to work with my peers in a different institution. Because these women, but for a few cultural differences, they are essentially the same as us. They're our peers, but they're from China. And it was very interesting getting to go over there and discuss with them these broad social issues. And really, for the first time, I think it was the first time that I was asked to try to solve an issue rather than defer to somebody else. And that was sort of a defining moment for me in the program. And then I just wanted to share a few photos of some of my favorite parts of the experience. So on the left, on the very first day, some of the Peking University students took us around campus, and we were having a lot of fun drawing up similarities between our campuses. So both campuses have a lake. Very fun. And then we have a few pictures on the right, both upper and lower, doing group work and listening in on lectures. And of course, we got to meet Madeleine Albright, who is an icon of women's leadership. And then we have more pictures of us gathering in a circle to discuss our experiences. I have a picture of my group during our 15-minute presentation to distinguished guests on our research project. And at the very bottom is a picture that's taken of us at the migrant school interacting with the students. as you think, the program was 100% work. We had a lot of fun experiences as well. We went out and explored the city, and we climbed the Great Wall, and then this is also a picture of a mix of Wellesley and Beijing students, and we were playing with traditional calligraphy. I thought it would be fun to write the names of Beijing University and Wellesley next to each other. So thank you.
Hi again, my name is Alice, and today I will be talking about how the Wellesley-PKU program gave me a chance to go to China again and see China from a new perspective and allow me to converge my two identities of being an American and being a Chinese. So let me ask you guys a question. How do you define home? How do you define your identity? Is it by the place that you live, the way that you dress, the way that you act, the language that you speak? These are some of the questions that I still ask myself today when I think about my identity. But first, let me give you some personal background on how I came to identify myself as a Chinese and an American. So when I was around 6 months old, I went back to China with my grandparents, and I was fully immersed in Chinese culture and Chinese tradition. I learned and I memorized a lot of Chinese ancient poetry that all Chinese children will tell you that they had to memorize. And I learned to love Chinese cooking, especially from my grandparents. And I learned, most importantly, the language skills that still I keep today. And so when I came back to the US with my parents later on in my life, I found that my Chinese identity was something that made me stand out, but not necessarily in a way that I wanted to. And so I quickly learned to assimilate to American culture. So I learned to give up my Chinese breakfast of tea, egg, porridge, and pickles for the American pancakes, scrambled eggs, and bacon. And I learned about American stories and song through Disney princesses and Pooh Bear. But the hardest thing for me to grasp was English. And when I finally did understand English and was able to speak it fluently, I felt like I had finally found my American identity. But as time went on and I spent more time in school around my American peers and less time in China, I realized that I was slowly giving up more and more of my Chinese identity. So when I came to Wellesley and I started learning Chinese again, I found that I had such a strong connection to my culture and I wanted to explore it much more. So when I heard about the Wellesley-PKU program, I thought that this was a perfect opportunity for me to converge my two identities and see if I can still relate to my PKU peers in China, as well as connect with my American students and help cross-cultural barriers. But how does this program relate to what I'm interested at Wellesley? I realized that from art history, I was able to understand a lot about Chinese culture, especially through ancient Chinese painting. I learned that the philosophy of Confucianism and filial piety that Narayani had mentioned is still a very strong and prevalent philosophy in Chinese culture today. I also learned from contemporary Chinese artists about how Chinese society views America now. And so with these skills, I was ready to go to China and be able to kind of smooth out any type of working relationship and try to create and cross cultural and language barriers. And as for my science background, I realized that I had the research skills as well as the teamwork skills in order for this program, in order for me to complete this program. So when we went to Beijing, I found that there were many, many instances where my American and Chinese identity came face to face. So I realized when we were going and visiting Chinese cultural heritage sites such as the Great Wall and the Forbidden City, I've been there many, many times with my family, but this was the first time that I went with my American students and PKU friends. And I realized that I could share in the awe and wonderment that my American students had, but I also shared the same understanding and pride in my culture that the PKU students had. I also had the same type of cultural meeting, in a way, when we had our meetings with the team, especially on preserving cultural heritage. By understanding the both sides of my team about American culture and Chinese culture, I hope that I was able to create a working atmosphere that was based on patience, understanding, and efficiency. I also faced the same experience when we went to work with migrant children and the migrant school. And I was placed as a classroom leader in order to make sure that everyone was able to get their work done and was able to communicate with each other. And I remember a really funny story about how one of the girls was trying to explain to one of the Wellesley students that she loved shopping. But they didn't understand what shopping was. And I finally had to explain to them, yeah, that's actually shopping. That's why they say shopping. So it was a very nice experience. And finally, on the last day, I was able to meet with women from all around the world and all over China. And I realized that many of these women were leaders, successful businesswomen, successful scientists, and leaders of our current society. And I realized that they all, and most of them, had a very similar situation to me. That we were stuck in this kind of in-between mode, not fully Chinese, yet not fully American. And instead of feeling lost about it, they realized that they could take an advantage of it, that they could be that bridge between the two countries and work to create better global leadership and global policy. And so I would really like to thank the Wellesley-Peking program for giving me this opportunity to find myself and to realize that I could use my identity as a bridge between these two countries.
All right, so I'm Claire Tam. I'm a political science major, and I'm just going to go through sort of a bit of my background, my personal interests, and my academic interests that brought me to this program. I'm going to talk a little bit about my cultural exchange experience, especially the interpersonal relationships and experiences that I had while in Beijing. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about the academic experience and some of the takeaways that I had from the academic program. So, why this program? In case you can't tell from that large pile of books, I love research, and I love sort of thinking about problems and trying to problem solve. So the interdisciplinary work and the chance to collaborate with people and to learn from their experiences in their fields and to problem solve with other disciplines was really exciting to me. And the chance to engage in cultural exchange was potentially even more exciting. The summer before this past summer, so right after my first year, I had a chance to visit Northern Ireland, thus the phone booth picture. And I discovered that I love traveling to new places. That was the first time I've been outside of the country, and it made me really just want to do more of this. And taking part in the Wellesley-Peking University program seemed like a perfect follow-up on my experiences in Northern Ireland because of my own personal family background. So I was born in Wuhan, China, which is the sort of southernmost circle and arrow on that map. And then we were going to be in Beijing, which is a little bit north of where I was born. And so when I was 1, I was adopted into an Irish and Chinese family. So the chance to go to Northern Ireland one summer and then China the next summer seemed really serendipitous and perfect. So I didn't always have a great relationship with my status as a Chinese adoptee. My mother really wanted me to stay connected with my heritage and my background, and so she signed me up for Chinese dance classes, made sure that I only had Chinese-looking Barbies. I really wanted what the historical American Girl dolls knew. I got the look like me Chinese doll. And she signed us up for language classes, all of which I vehemently opposed. I slept with my hair in braids at night, so my hair would be all crinkly and look less sort of straight and Chinese. I really only had Caucasian friends growing up, and I absolutely refused to make the wontons when we went to cooking class. I just played with dough. So I didn't feel particularly comfortable with my status as a Chinese American, and I didn't feel like other people were comfortable with that about me either. I remember in 3rd grade being teased about having slanty eyes, and so they were pulling their eyes out like this. And then my response was, well, I don't want marble eyes, and pushed my eyes out. But despite my marble eye comeback, that really shook my confidence in being a Chinese American. And so the chance to talk to other students with similar backgrounds as Chinese Americans, or to talk to students who had grown up in China, where I kept thinking, if I had stayed in China, I could have easily been on the other side of the table, and I could have been welcoming Wellesley students. So it felt like a really nice way to come full circle and to think a little bit more about my race, ethnicity, and identity. So, needless to say, based on all that, the cultural exchange part was really central to my experience in the Wellesley-Peking University program. And it was interesting because I'm so used to feeling like an outsider for being Asian. It was strange going to China and feeling like an outsider for not being Asian enough. And I remember we were in the market bartering for things, and people didn't seem to understand why I needed Narayani to do the bartering for me. And someone came up and tapped me on the shoulder as if to say hi, because it seemed like he recognized me. And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't speak English." He laughed at me, went over, tapped his friend on the shoulder, pointed at me, and then they both laughed at me. So that was really fun. But it was really interesting, and I didn't feel particularly like I was coming home. Nothing rung any bells. I didn't recognize anything. But the more I started working with the students at Peking University, and the more I got to be really good friends with a student who was actually from South Korea. And it was interesting talking to her, because she was talking too about how she had struggled sometimes to balance her identity as a South Korean and a student in China. And it was really helpful to realize that this is not just an issue that you run into in America as a Chinese American, but you run into it no matter where you are when you have a very varied background. And so having that connection with my group member, despite the fact that we were not from the same country, and it was a nice feeling of solidarity there. I also got other fun connections, like learning to write my name. So in the middle of Peking University in Wellesley, there's my name, Guojun, which is the name I have on my Chinese birth certificate and passport. And so one of the Peking University students wrote it beautifully, and then I wrote it very sloppily next to it, and I did that again at the migrant school, and all the kids laughed at me. They taught me how to write monkey, because I'm the year of the monkey. So it was really fun to be able to make those connections with my background as a Chinese American, and seeing the cultural sites in particular was very exciting, because not only were they part of my personal cultural background, but they were part of my personal story as well, because when my parents went to adopt me, they visited the Great Wall, they visited the Forbidden City, and I have all these pictures of them there right before they adopted me, and so it was really fun to be able to see these historical cultural sites from both those lenses, as a Chinese American and as someone whose parents went there as part of my adoption story. So that was a really exciting part. And I actually didn't realize that the cultural exchange piece would be such a big part of my experience when I initially registered for the program, and was really excited. I got my acceptance, and I was like, oh yay, I get to do research, I get to work with groups, I love academia. And so the academics were absolutely spectacular. It was great learning from the professors and hearing about all these different global issues. But I remember getting the program, and I was looking through, I was thinking, all right, this is cool, it's global affairs, I'm a political science major, this is going to be awesome. And I looked, there were no political science lectures. So I was thinking, all right, well, this will be interesting. I really only take classes in the political science department. I will have nothing to offer. And so I was a little nervous about this at first. But the more I started working with my group, we were in the Preserving Cultural Heritage group. And I actually found that we took a very political science friendly approach to this idea of preserving cultural heritage. And we talked about it as how can understanding cultural heritage be a tool for promoting better diplomacy. And I found myself being able to draw on all these sources of conflict. Where does conflict come from? What are the origins of major world issues? And using examples from my political science classes about Nixon going to China for the first time and what that meant in terms of the international sphere and diplomacy. And so it was a really interesting contrast between my program the previous summer in Northern Ireland, which was very focused on politics, and I developed this passion for Irish politics. And then I was in my program at Peking University, where we were talking about urban challenges, and while I didn't develop a passion for urban challenges, I found myself really interested in thinking about how can these topics that aren't conventionally related to my field of interest, how can they help me enhance my understanding of and how can they help me reevaluate issues that I encounter within my major. And so I'm actually next semester registering for a lot of classes outside the political science department, including an anthropology class. I've never done that before. But I'm not necessarily looking at how can I get my distribution requirements in as close to a political science manner as possible anymore, and more how can the classes that I'm taking for these distribution requirements really enhance my understanding of my chosen concentration. So that was a really great piece of the academic program. And I didn't feel like as much of a hypocrite when I was talking about how great interdisciplinary learning is, because I don't really take things outside my department. But now I really feel like I can give some concrete examples of why I support this idea of a liberal arts education and multidisciplinary learning. So a couple of takeaways that I have from the program. I learned a lot about myself personally. I realized that yes, I am very American, but I also found that I have a lot more in common with my father's Cantonese background than I thought, because we were in Beijing and everyone was talking about, let's go get bao. And all I wanted was the cha su bao, which is this roast pork in a bun, and it's really common apparently in southern China and Guangzhou, which is where my dad's from. And in Beijing, they didn't have it at all, and no one understood what, or I didn't understand why no one had this bao. That's just what I wanted. And I realized that I really do prefer southern Chinese cuisine to northern cuisine, and it was kind of fun seeing that I actually did have more of my father's side of the family than I thought I did in my life. And I learned a lot about myself in terms of how I work in groups. Especially from talking to the Peking University students, and they're talking about how people from Wellesley can be very aggressive and really just talk a mile a minute. And I looked in the proverbial dictionary and saw my face there. So it really made me reevaluate how I approach group work sometimes, and just be aware that this is my working style, and it may not work for all group presentations. It may work really well in some cases, but sometimes I might want to scale it back a little bit, think about how to make sure I'm not intimidating people out of contributing to groups. So that was a really great experience all across, and I'm just really grateful to have been able to take part. So I think we're going to do a brief conclusion and then take questions.
So, great. Thanks again for joining us today. And I think we want to all reiterate how grateful we are to participate in this program. And it could not have been made possible without the help of so many people, many of whom are sitting in the audience today. So just to give a brief overview, these are all clips from the Wellesley News website, just kind of showing the support, the planning, and the publicity that this program received. Anyways, there are a lot of clips, but this is a picture of us at the final. Anyways, thank you guys so much for coming. We really enjoyed being able to think about our experiences, reflect on them, share them, integrate them into kind of a cohesive story.
And we would like to thank a few people.
Yes.
The Albright Institute and Wellesley College for giving us this opportunity to participate in this great program. Professor Joseph Joyce for advising us and going through this presentation multiple times now. Joanne Murray and Kate Miller for all their support during the course of the program and after. Ying Chen for being here and also supporting us. The PKU faculty and administration, lecturers, alumni, and guests who joined us at the program. President Kim Bottomley and Dean Shannon for all their support during the program and for coming today. Thank you for your time. Wenyan Dunn could not be with us today because of a health issue. She really hoped she could be here, but
So if anybody has questions for the whole group or for individuals,
Hi, I just want to say congratulations to all of you for getting into this program. I know it was a very selective process, so you're all rock stars. I do have a question. I was wondering what your future plans are and how they were affected by this experience. For example, if you're a senior after graduation, what are you thinking of doing? Or if you are not a senior, maybe research projects for the year or even future internships. But, what are you thinking?
Sure. I'm a senior. I think the only senior in our group. And I met many women at the conference that were huge supporters and mentors to me. Both at the conference, talking about their careers and them giving me advice right there, and then also as we continue to stay in touch. So it's been really great to have women to look up to, that most of whom are Wellesley alumni who have gone through Wellesley. And I guess really being in China again for me was key, and definitely reinforced my desire to somehow be a bridge between the two cultures. And right now I want to go into international business and really solve problems that are apparent from both sides, and use my understanding of both cultures, my knowledge of the languages to bridge that gap.
Yeah, I'm actually really interested now in public health, especially in China. Recently in a lot of news, there has been a lot of public health issues going on in China right now, and I felt that this program allowed me to kind of have a multidisciplinary approach to the sciences and health, which is what I'm ultimately interested in.
And then I'd mentioned how I'm trying to branch out in my academic pursuits a little bit, but it was also great sort of sitting at our conference tables and talking to a lot of women, and a lot of them they were really honest about the fact that it's tough being a parent and a sort of woman in the world as well. And so while that didn't necessarily change any of my plans, it was really validating to hear that yes, this is a challenge, but yes, we pushed through it, and we still feel like we managed a balance that we're comfortable with, and we're still doing great things. Clearly they were interesting and important enough to be at the conference, so I will consider that a great success. And so in terms of that, it was just helpful to hear, because that's something that I'm always a little bit concerned about, how to manage both family life and work life, and it was really encouraging to hear that people manage it.
I'm not sure what I'm doing yet. My friends are convinced I'm going to do a PhD in economics and join the faculty. People back home think I'm going to join the Indian government. I don't know. But being in China again over the summer reinforced how much I really like traveling and how much I like Chinese culture. After the summer, I think I can basically settle in anywhere in the world, and the program reinforced that as well with cross-cultural learning and interdisciplinary support. So I don't know where I'm going. I don't really know my future plans either yet, but something I found really sort of reassuring was at the conference. I spoke at my table. I was speaking with a lot of the other women there, and they sort of told me to enjoy the time I have right now, because there was one woman who, very interesting lady, and she started off studying biochemistry, and she worked in a research lab, and she went on and got a PhD, but then she changed her mind, and she went through so many different career changes, and now she's retired and looking into becoming an amateur winemaker. I don't know, her story kind of stuck with me in the sense that I felt relieved, because I think we kind of get stuck in this mindset that we have to decide right now what we're going to do for the rest of our life. She showed me she had 6 different lives and was perfectly happy. All of them, I would like to be like that.